My family demanded I quit university to pay for my siblings' education, but when I refused and left home, my brother dropped out of law school. My sister rejected them, and my parents lost the control they desperately wanted. I'm 21 years old. I'm in my second year of college studying psychology, and like 6 months ago, my life fell apart in the most absurd way possible. Well, when I say it fell apart, I should actually say that I finally could see clearly what had been happening my whole life. You know what I mean? Sometimes you need things to completely explode to realize they were already broken a long time ago. I guess I should start from the beginning, so all of this makes sense. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. I have a brother named Michael, who's 2 years younger than me, and a sister, Natalie, who's 17. My parents have always been the type who have plans for everything. My dad is a lawyer and my mom worked in marketing before staying home when Michael was born. For as long as I can remember. Basically, Michael was the golden child of the family, the one who was going to do great things, the brilliant future lawyer who would follow in my dad's footsteps. And Natalie was the perfect princess, the one who got the best grades, who played piano, who won all the math competitions. And me? Well, I was just Evelyn, the one who was there, who did what she had to do, but it was never enough. It's not that my parents were openly cruel to me. Honestly, that would have been easier to identify. It was more subtle than that, you know? Like when Michael got a B and it was a family celebration with his favorite dessert and pictures for Instagram. But when I got an A, it was, oh, that's nice. But you could have gotten an A+ if you'd tried harder. Or when Natalie needed classes for anything, piano, French, tennis, price didn't matter. But when I asked for help with a science camp in high school, my mom told me I was too old for those things and that I should look for a summer job instead. Things like that, small but constant, that over time make you feel like you're invisible or like your value depends only on how useful you can be to others. When it came time to apply for college, my parents were pretty clear with me. They told me, "Look, Evelyn, we're going to help you with the basics, but don't expect the same thing Michael is going to get because he's going to law school and that's an investment in his future. You study something practical and get scholarships." So that's what I did. I literally killed myself, studying to get a partial scholarship and worked part-time throughout high school to save money. I got into college with a mix of scholarship, student loans, and my savings, plus something my parents contributed monthly, like $400, which basically covered part of my food and personal expenses. It wasn't much, but it was something. I guess. Michael started law school like a year and a half ago, and from that moment, everything at home revolved around him. The conversations at the table were always about his case studies, his professors, his future plans. Natalie was in her senior year of high school and was already applying to colleges, obviously the best and most expensive ones, because she was special and deserved the best. And I was in my second year, barely surviving between classes, part-time jobs, and trying to pay for my own things, because I had learned a long time ago that asking my parents for help only resulted in passive-aggressive comments about how I was wasting my potential or how I should be more responsible. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had gone home because my mom had sent me like 1,000 messages saying we needed to have an important family meeting. I thought maybe someone was sick or they were going to sell the house or something like that. I don't know. But I definitely didn't expect what happened. I arrived and my dad was in the living room with that serious face he makes when he's about to give important news. My mom was sitting on the couch with her hands folded, and Michael and Natalie were already there too. Michael looked uncomfortable, like he knew, something I didn't, and Natalie was playing with her phone, obviously bored to be there. My dad started with his typical lawyer speech. Talking in circles about family responsibilities and sacrifices we all must make and the common good of the family. I just nodded, without really understanding where all this was going, until he finally dropped the bomb. He told me, "Evelyn, your mother and I have been reviewing our finances and the situation is complicated. Michael needs to concentrate on law school without the pressure of working, and Natalie is going to enter college next year, probably one of the private universities she's applying to." I still didn't understand, thinking they were going to tell me they couldn't give me the $400 monthly anymore, or something like that, which would have been fine. Honestly, I had managed with less before. But no, what they said was much worse. My mom took the floor and with that sweet but poisonous voice she has told me, "Honey, we need you to consider taking a break from college. It would only be temporary, maybe a year or two, long enough for you to work full-time and be able to help us cover Michael's expenses and save for Natalie. You already have 2 years. You can come back later when the situation is more stable." I sat there, literally processing what I had just heard, and I thought maybe I had misunderstood, because it didn't make sense. It simply made no fucking sense. I asked them, "Are you asking me to leave college to work and pay for Michael and Natalie's school?" And my dad, with that twisted lawyer logic he has, told me it wasn't exactly like that it was a family investment, and that we all had to contribute according to our abilities. He explained to me that Michael had a brilliant future as a lawyer, and that interrupting his studies would be wasting his potential. That Natalie was exceptionally talented and deserved to go to the best possible college, and that I had already experienced college life and could resume my studies later without a problem. As if college was a fucking trip to Disneyland you can take whenever you want. I don't know. It made me so angry I could barely even speak. My mom added that, besides, I was the oldest, the responsible one, the one who had always been more independent, and that this was simply what was expected of me as the older sister. She told me that Michael and Natalie needed me, that the family needed me, and that if I really cared about my siblings, I wouldn't hesitate to make this sacrifice. The way she said it, as if it were my obligation, as if I had been born solely to serve as a plan B for them, made me feel physically sick. I looked at Michael, hoping he'd say something, that he'd confront them, that he'd defend me. But he just looked at the floor. And Natalie was still on her phone as if none of this had anything to do with her. I told them no, plain and simple, no. I explained that I had worked very hard to be where I was, that my grades were good, that I had plans for my life, that I wasn't going to throw 2 years of college in the trash to finance my siblings' dreams while mine didn't matter. My dad turned red. That kind of red he gets when he's angry but trying to maintain composure. And he told me I was being selfish and immature, that I didn't understand how a family works, that they had made many sacrifices for me, and that the least I could do was reciprocate now that they needed me. My mom started with her emotional manipulations, saying things like, "I can't believe you prefer your career over your siblings' well-being, and what would your grandmother say if she were alive and saw how selfish you've become? And, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Every word was like a knife, designed specifically to make me feel guilty, to make me doubt myself, to convince me that I was the problem. And for one damn second, it almost worked. It almost made me feel that maybe I was selfish, that maybe I should sacrifice myself for them. But then I remembered all those years of being invisible, of never being enough, of watching them celebrate every achievement of Michael and Natalie while my achievements were ignored or minimized. I remembered all the times I needed something, and they told me no because it wasn't a priority. All the times they made me feel like I was a burden, like my existence was solely to make their life easier. And something inside me just clicked, like when you finally understand something that was always there but you had never been able to see clearly. I told them, "You know what? You're right about one thing. I am more independent. But not because I was born that way, but because you forced me to be. You forced me to manage on my own from the beginning while you poured everything into Michael and Natalie. So yes, I'm going to be independent, but my way, not yours. I'm not going to leave college. I'm not going to pay for my siblings' education, and I'm not going to keep being your backup plan." My dad interrupted me, yelling, "If you're not going to help this family, then you're not part of this family." And I, without thinking much, told him perfect. Then I'm leaving. The silence that followed was surreal. Literally nobody moved for like 10 seconds. I think they didn't expect me to actually say yes. They thought I was going to get scared and give in. But I had already made the decision. I stood up, and my mom started with her drama, saying I couldn't be serious, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I was going to regret it. But I was already walking towards the stairs to go up to my old room and pack my things. Michael followed me and whispered that he was sorry, that he didn't know they were going to do this, but I told him that if he really was sorry, he would have said something earlier when it still mattered. I packed everything that was important: clothes, documents, my laptop, photos, basically what fit in 2 suitcases and a backpack. I went down the stairs and my parents were still in the living room, my mom crying dramatically and my dad with his arms crossed looking at me with contempt. I told them, "This is what you wanted, right? For me to be independent. Well, here you have me. Completely independent from you." And I walked out that door without looking back. literally walked with my suitcases down the street without having any idea where I was going to go, but knowing I couldn't stay there one more second. I called my friend Monica, who I shared some classes with, and told her everything, crying in a Starbucks like 2 blocks from my parents' house. Monica, who is basically a human angel, told me I could stay at her apartment temporarily, that she had a sofa bed, and it was no problem. I spent like a week in her living room, looking for options, applying for additional financial aid, talking to my academic advisor at the Points University. It was one of the scariest weeks of my life, because suddenly I realized I was completely alone, without a safety net, without a plan B, just me and the decisions I had made. My academic advisor, Dr. Martinez, was incredibly helpful. She helped me apply for more emergency financial aid and connected me with the on-campus housing program. Turns out there was an available space in the dorms because a student had transferred, and with the additional financial aid I got, I could afford it. It wasn't a palace. It was a tiny room I shared with another girl. But it was mine, and that's what mattered. I also increased my hours at my part-time job at the university library and got another job on weekends as a waitress at a restaurant near campus. What really surprised me was when I got a message from my aunt Rebecca, my mom's sister. Rebecca had always been the black sheep of the family, you know. She left home at 18, became an artist, never got married or had kids, basically did everything my mom and my grandparents considered irresponsible. I never saw her much, maybe at Christmas or some birthday, but I had always liked her. She wrote to me saying she had found out from someone about what had happened, that my parents were saying I had had an absurd, rebellious attack, but that she knew my mom well enough to know there was more to the story. I told her everything, and Rebecca told me she had gone through something similar when she was young, that my mom and my grandparents had always had this thing about playing favorites and manipulating people to meet their expectations. She offered me financial help. Not much because she wasn't swimming in money either, but she told me she could send me $200 monthly and that if I needed a place to stay during summer breaks or vacations, her house was open to me. I cried when I read her message. Honestly, because it was the first time in a long time that I felt someone in my family really saw me and supported me, without conditions. I moved into the dorm like 2 weeks after leaving my parents' house. My roommate, Sarah, was super quiet and studied engineering, so basically she lived in the library or the lab, which was perfect because I also needed space to process everything that was happening. The first few days were weird, like being in a bubble where nothing seemed real. But little by little, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Yes, I was stressed about money and having to work so much, but at the same time, I felt free. You know what I mean? I no longer had to deal with my mom's passive-aggressive comments, or my dad's indifference, or living in Michael and Natalie's shadow. Like 3 weeks after all this, Michael wrote to me. It was a long message, where he basically apologized for not defending me, for being complicit in how our parents treated me all these years. He told me he had been thinking a lot about everything, and realized I had been treated unfairly, that he had been selfish in accepting everything they gave him while I managed on my own. He asked for forgiveness and told me he wanted to have a relationship with me outside the context of our parents, that if I was willing to give him a chance, he wanted to be a better brother. I'm not going to lie. My first reaction was anger. Like, and now you realize? Now that I no longer live there and already made my decisions? But after thinking about it, I decided to give him a chance. We met at a cafe near his university and talked for like 3 hours. He told me he hadn't been happy either, that all the pressure of being the perfect son, the brilliant future lawyer, was killing him, that he actually didn't want to study law but had felt he had no choice because it was what Dad expected of him. He told me he had seen how they treated me and that part of him always knew it was wrong, but it was easier to stay quiet and enjoy the benefits than to defend what was right. What really impacted me was when he told me he was considering leaving law school. He explained that what he really wanted was to be a teacher, that he was passionate about working with children and teaching, but that Dad had made it very clear that was wasting his potential and that he wasn't going to support him if he followed that path. I told him I understood perfectly what he felt, but that in the end he had to decide if he was going to live his life or the life our parents wanted for him. It was an honest and raw conversation, probably the realest conversation we had ever had in our lives. Meanwhile, my parents didn't stay quiet. They started sending me messages, trying to manipulate me into coming back. First, it was my mom with her professional victim routine, telling me she was devastated, that she couldn't sleep thinking about how her oldest daughter had abandoned her, that the family was suffering because of me. Then it was my dad, with his more rational but equally manipulative approach, saying I was making a mistake, that ruining my relationship with the family out of pride was stupid, that I was always going to regret this decision. I didn't respond to any of their messages for like 2 weeks, until I finally decided I needed to say what I thought one last time. I wrote them a long message, basically making everything clear. I told them that throughout my life they had made me feel like I wasn't enough, like my value depended only on how useful I could be to Michael and Natalie, that they had never celebrated my achievements or been interested in my dreams, and that their proposal that I leave college to finance my siblings had simply been the confirmation of what I had always felt, that I didn't matter to them in the same way. I told them I wasn't angry because they had asked me for help, but because they expected me to sacrifice my future without even considering that my life had the same value as Michael's or Natalie's. And I made it clear I wasn't coming back, that I was going to finish my degree, and that I was going to build my life without their help or approval. My dad's response was pathetic, basically telling me I was being dramatic and that someday I was going to mature and understand that family is the most important thing. My mom was more aggressive, saying I was ungrateful, that after everything they had done for me, this is how I repaid them, and that I shouldn't expect anything from them ever again. Perfect, I told them. That's exactly what I want. And that's where it stayed for a while. What I didn't expect was for my parents to start telling their version of the story to other relatives, painting me as the rebellious and selfish daughter who had abandoned her family for no reason. I started getting messages from aunts and uncles and cousins I barely knew, telling me I should reconsider, that family is important, that I was breaking my parents' hearts. Some messages were kinder, like genuine concern, but others were directly accusatory. I had to block several people because it was affecting me mentally. You know, reading every day that you're a bad person eventually starts to affect you even if you know it's not true. Then something happened that I definitely didn't see coming. My parents decided to sell the family house without even telling me. I found out from Michael, who called me all stressed out telling me that Dad had announced at dinner they had accepted an offer on the house and they were going to move to something smaller to optimize their finances. Michael was in shock because that was the house where we grew up, where all our memories were, and they were selling it without consulting any of us. Natalie apparently started crying, but my parents told her it was necessary, and she would have to understand. When Michael told me this, my first reaction was disbelief, but then I realized it made perfect sense. My parents were trying to play the victims, to show they were sacrificing themselves and doing difficult things because their selfish daughter wasn't helping them. It was pure theater, a way to pressure me to feel guilty and come back. But it didn't work. Honestly, I didn't care what they did with the house. It was no longer my problem. I told Michael that if there was anything of mine still there, to donate it or throw it away, that I wasn't going back for those things. I decided to block my parents' numbers. It sounds drastic, I know, but I needed peace of mind to be able to concentrate on college and my work. Every time I saw a message from them, it upset me all day, made me doubt my decisions, made me feel bad, and I wasn't willing to keep allowing them to have that power over me. It was liberating. Honestly, knowing I wasn't going to wake up to another manipulative message or another accusation from my mom. What did surprise me was getting a message from Natalie like 2 months after all this. We had never been very close. She had always been the favorite, and I had grown up resentful about that. So we didn't have much relationship beyond the superficial. But her message was different from what I expected. She told me she finally understood what I had lived through, that since I left, all the pressure and expectations had fallen on her, and she was realizing how toxic our parents were. She told me that Mom criticized her constantly, that nothing she did was enough, that Dad had told her that if she didn't get into a prestigious university, it was because she hadn't tried hard enough. Natalie told me she had always thought our parents treated me normally and that I exaggerated. But now that she had experienced a little of what I lived through for years, she realized I was right. She apologized for not defending me, for enjoying being the favorite without thinking about how that affected me. She told me she admired me for having the courage to leave, that she didn't know if she could do the same, but she was considering her options. I responded honestly. I told her I didn't hold a grudge against her, that I understood she was also a victim of our parents' toxic dynamic, but that she had to make her own decisions about how to handle her relationship with them. And from then on, Natalie and I started talking more often. It was weird at first, But little by little, we built a genuine relationship based on mutual understanding instead of competition or resentment. She told me about the things she was going through with the parents, and I gave her advice on how to deal with them, how not to let their comments affect her so much, how to maintain boundaries. It was nice, honestly, to have a relationship with my sister for the first time in our lives. Michael also made a big decision. Like 6 months after our conversation at the cafe, he called to tell me he had left law school. He told me he couldn't keep living a lie, that every day he spent studying something he hated was a wasted day of his life, and he had decided to follow his true passion and become a teacher. Our parents, obviously, were furious. According to Michael, Dad yelled at him that he was a failure, that he was wasting his life, that he was never going to amount to anything being a teacher. My mom cried and told him he was breaking her heart. How could he do this to them after everything they had invested in him? But Michael stood firm. He told me he had thought a lot about our conversation, about how I had had the courage to defend my life and my decisions, and that he needed to do the same. He enrolled in an education program at a different university and got a part-time job as a tutor to pay for his studies. My parents stopped talking to him for a while, trying to punish him with silence, but eventually they had to accept it because he wasn't going to change his mind. Michael and I became closer after that. We finally had a relationship based on mutual respect, and not on the toxic dynamic our parents had created. At college, things were going well. My grades were good. I was making friends, participating in a support group for students with toxic families that I had found at the campus counseling center. Hearing other people's stories who had gone through similar situations helped me a lot to process everything, to realize I wasn't crazy, that what my parents had done was wrong, and that I had made the right decision by leaving. The group met once a week, and it was a safe space where we could talk without being judged, where everyone understood how complicated it is to cut ties with toxic family. What was interesting was that in that group, I started sharing my story more openly, and several students told me it had helped them to hear about my experience. The group coordinator, Dr. Chen, asked me if I would be interested in helping to develop a peer support program where students who had gone through difficult family situations could mentor and support others who were in the process. She offered to me a paid part-time position to coordinate this program, which was perfect because I needed the money, and it was also something I was really passionate about. I accepted and started working on the program. It was incredibly rewarding, honestly, to be able to use my experience to help others, to let them know they weren't alone, that it was possible to build an independent and healthy life even when your family doesn't support you. Working on the program also helped me process my own situation, to see it more clearly and with less emotion, to understand that what my parents did wasn't a moment of weakness, but a pattern of behavior that had been there my whole life. It's been 6 months since I left that house, and my life is completely different now. I work 2 jobs plus the peer support program. I study full-time. And yes, I'm constantly tired. But it's a different kind of tired, you know? It's the tiredness of working for something that's mine, for a life I chose, not the tiredness of trying to meet impossible expectations or living in a toxic environment. I have my own space, my own rules, my own peace. My parents eventually stopped trying to contact me. I guess they realized I wasn't going to give in. Every now and then I get some family gossip through Michael or Natalie about how they're doing or what they're up to, but honestly, it doesn't affect me like it used to. It's like they're strangers. People I know but no longer have an emotional connection with. I don't feel hatred towards them, honestly. I feel more pity, because they lost the opportunity to have a genuine relationship with their daughter to maintain their need for control and their absurd expectations. Natalie is in her first year of college now, at a state school instead of the expensive private universities my parents wanted. She told me she decided it wasn't worth going into debt for years just to fulfill the image our parents wanted to project. She's studying graphic design, something she's passionate about, but that Dad considers not serious enough. She and I talk regularly now, and it's nice to have that sisterly relationship we never had when we were younger. Michael is in his first semester of the education program and tells me it's the right decision he's made in his life, that he finally feels authentic and in control of his future. My Aunt Rebecca visits me sometimes, brings me coffee, and we chat about life, art, family, everything. She told me more about her own story, about how she also had to distance herself from my grandparents and my mom when she was young because they made her feel inadequate for not wanting the traditional lifestyle they expected. She told me it was difficult, but it was the best thing she could have done for her mental health and happiness. I feel lucky to have her in my life. To have someone who understands and supports me without conditions. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I had given in, if I had left college and started working to pay for my siblings' education. I would probably be resentful, bitter, feeling trapped in a life I didn't choose. Maybe I would have gone back to school years later, or maybe never. Who knows? What I do know is that I wouldn't be where I am now, with clarity about who I am and what I want, with genuine relationships with Michael and Natalie, with peace of mind and the freedom to build my life on my own terms. Last week, a girl from the support program asked me if I ever regret leaving, if I sometimes think about going back and trying to fix things with my parents. I told her no, that I don't regret it one bit, because what they wanted wasn't a relationship with me. They wanted a version of me that fulfilled their function in their life, and I'm no longer willing to be that for anyone. I told her that maybe someday, if they do the work of acknowledging what they did wrong and really want to change, we could try to have some kind of relationship, but that depends completely on them, not on me. For now, I'm okay with my life, with the people I chose to have in it, with the direction I'm going. I'm finishing my second year with good grades. I have work. I have a roof over my head. I have healthy relationships. And above all, I have control over my own life. I no longer need my parents' approval to feel like I'm worth something. I no longer need them to see me, to know I exist, and that, honestly, is more valuable than anything they could have given me if I had stayed. I guess in the end, they did what they wanted. They made me someone independent, just not in the way they expected.